Hey, and welcome to episode 34 of Think Like a Hacker. We have a very busy show for you today, fortunately and unfortunately, because it means there's a lot going on in the world of cybersecurity. We're covering the Capital One breach that just happened, and a lot going on here in our own Seattle. We've got an update on Equifax. Marcus Hutchins has finally been sentenced, so we're covering that story along with a bunch of others. Get ready for an amazing show. All right, Kathy, how's it going in Phoenix today? Phoenix the Furnace.
Phoenix the Furnace. We have a monsoon hitting right now, so if there's thunder and lightning during the show, perhaps Mother Nature would like to punctuate some of our news.
Nice. I heard Max, who's filming the podcast on your side, is freaking out about the audio, so hopefully he doesn't freak out too much.
Yeah. We also have a dog who's a little freaked out too,
no.
so it could be an exciting episode.
Bodie. Poor guy.
Bodie's freaking.
All right, well, let's just dive straight in. So
Sounds good.
So I guess we've got a little bit of news just to start off here about WordCamp Asia, right?
Yeah, WordCamp Asia was just announced, and it's going to take place early 2020, February 21st through the 23rd in Bangkok, Thailand. And I was talking with an organizer in WordCamp Boston, and they said they're expecting about 1,000 attendees. There are 127 meetups in Asia with about 73,000 members from 23 different countries. It'll be the first WordCamp, regional WordCamp in Asia, so that should be pretty exciting.
Wow, that's really interesting. Yeah, you know what really surprised me is that WordCamp EU was 3,000 people, right?
Yes.
Yeah, compared to WordCamp US, which sort of hovers between 1,300 and 1,800 people. So it'd be interesting to see if WordCamp Asia goes in the same direction. If it also kind of becomes bigger than the, I guess, flagship WordCamp in the US. Well, we'll have to see.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah. All right, and I guess you got some good news recently about WordCamp US.
I did. A bunch of us submitted talks, and it's a really competitive process. And one of my talks, the ones I actually did in Boston, was selected. So I'll be speaking at WordCamp US, and very excited about that, talking about the hacker mindset. So more thinking like a hacker.
Yeah, and I think you said to me that was actually a favorite talk of yours to give, right?
It was, yeah. It was really fun because I'm not just talking about security. I'm talking about sort of taking the whole mindset of being a hacker and applying it to various areas of your life. And of course, applying it to security as well. So it's fun. I'm excited.
Yeah, no, I am too. We have a lot going on at WordCamp US, and we'll be making some announcements over the next few weeks. But yeah, it's very exciting, very busy, and it's going to be awesome. If you're going to WordCamp US, definitely check out Kathy's talk, and we're going to have a couple other surprises for you there. So it's going to be great. All right, so let's dive into the news. And Capital One was breached, and this is a really interesting one. It's right in our own backyard. I am currently based in Redmond, Washington, which is a suburb of Seattle, Washington. And this is kind of centered around Seattle and Amazon and AWS and so on. So what happened here is that Capital One data from approximately 100 million people was illegally accessed. Paige Thompson was arrested by FBI agents on July 29th, which was yesterday. And she's accused of downloading over 30 gigabytes of credit card data belonging to Capital One. Amazon has identified her as a former cloud services employee back in 2016, and she's based in Seattle. And of course, Amazon is headquartered in Seattle. It's unconfirmed, but the data seems to have been stored in an S3 bucket. AWS is making it clear that it's not a vulnerability in AWS that caused this. The prosecutors are saying that it was caused by a misconfigured firewall that was protecting one of the bank applications. And I'm quoting what these folks are saying directly here. So not a whole heck of a lot of data there on exactly what happened and what vulnerability was used and so on. But yeah, she appeared in federal court in Seattle. The data theft occurred sometime between March 12th and July 17th. And apparently when she appeared in court, she was, kind of had her head on her hands and wasn't very happy. And Capital One says the breach didn't require insider knowledge. The data is mostly credit card applications ranging from the year 2005 to 2019 to this year. And it includes names, addresses, phone numbers, dates of birth, self-reported income, credit scores, and some transaction data. And of course, it includes 140,000 social security numbers and about 80,000 bank account numbers. So pretty serious stuff. The social security number being the password that you cannot change, right, Kathy?
Definitely, yes.
Utterly absurd. And I was actually chatting with someone in... was it Bulgaria, I guess? But somewhere in, I think, Central Eastern Europe, and you can actually change your identity number there. And in the US, you can't do that. So once your social security number is out there, it's out there, which is what makes the whole identity protection thing that they offer you once your social has been breached a bit of a joke. But anyway, Paige is facing a maximum of 5 years right now for computer fraud and has already appeared in court. So Capital One has been aggressively migrating their data into the cloud, and they've been fairly public about that. They've been a real proponent of the cloud. And, this is a statement from Capital One, and it's, like I said, it's kind of hilarious. Importantly, no credit card account numbers or login credentials were compromised, and over 99% of social security numbers were not compromised, Capital One says. So see how many social security numbers Capital One were able to protect while breaching 140,000 social security numbers. Man, I just want to unpack this statement and tear it to pieces, No credit card numbers were breached. Right, the number that you can change. Awesome. You just, apply for a new one, and the vendor, of course, bears the risk in the case of credit cards. No login credentials were compromised. Well, it doesn't matter because your data was breached anyway. And, again, the social security number thing. And then, of course, they've offered free credit monitoring and identity protection available to everyone affected. Oh, that is so great. Capital One, such a great company. But yeah. So Brian Krebs is covering the story, and this is a direct quote from his site, which is, of course, krebsonsecurity.com. That's where Brian publishes all of his research. Check it out if you haven't heard of it and have been living on the moon. Capital One learned about the theft from a tip sent via email on July 17th, which alerted the company that some of its leaked data was being stored out in the open on the software development platform GitHub. That GitHub account was for a user named Netcrave, which includes the resume and name of one Paige A. Thompson. So, Paige is, as a hacker in this case, I guess her OPSEC or operational security was horrendous. And I'll get into that a little bit more once I've shared the rest of the details here. So Brian actually published an archive of her Twitter posts on his site, and some of the text there, she goes by the handle erratic, and her tweets are an example of a couple tweets. So then I launched an instance into their VPC with access to Aurora, which is a database on AWS. Attach the correct security profile and dump your MySQL to local 32 terabyte storage, encrypted, perhaps using a customer gateway to a VPC IPsec session over OpenVPN over SOX proxies, depending on how lucky I'm feeling. And then I hack into their EC2 instances, assume role, and she goes on. But she's basically on Twitter with a photo of herself on her profile, talking about her adventures in the cybers there. And she had her own Slack channel and would invite people into the Slack channel via a meetup group and kind of show off her hacking skills in Slack as well. And she talks about her struggles with gender identity, lack of employment, persistent suicidal thoughts, and so on. And I got to tell you, from my perspective here, this is it's really quite sad because it strikes me as someone who is trying their very best to connect with others through their hacking exploits and using their knowledge of technology to form a connection with folks out on the internet by any means necessary. And I think that this kind of led to taking greater and greater risks. And I'm obviously speculating here, but I got thinking about this when I was writing about the story. And it suggests that we can do a better job of creating spaces for people who are struggling to connect with others. I think a lot of harm originates when people fail to connect and when they feel incredibly alone. And I know that a lot of folks are probably screaming at me right now because I'm showing a lot of empathy towards a hacker. But, long time ago, I may or may not have been a hacker of sorts back in the 90s, sort of early to mid 90s. And I spent a lot of time on IRC, which of course now Slack has replaced a lot of that. And I knew a lot of folks that were doing that, and I think there were a lot of people that were trying to connect in one way or another. And IRC addicts were pretty common, and I think that was just people who found a world where they could connect with someone and spent an incredible amount of time there. And I think that whether you're into hacking or phreaking or the where scene back then or whatever, it was all about making some sort of connection, kind of showing off your amazing abilities and impressing people and getting credit from your peers and that kind of thing. And I think that there's a lot of folks out there that have a lack of that in their lives, and they have the ability to do harm. Maybe they're a cybersecurity researcher. Maybe they own guns and happen to be very good at shooting them, and so on. And so I think that, sure, there's we've done a lot of thinking about how to punish people and for what they've done. But I think if we can preemptively prevent these things from happening in the first place, that would be pretty cool. So, all right. So what's happening in the news about this is that there's a narrative that's been picked up by I think Wall Street Journal is one of the outlets, among others, where is AWS secure or not? And it's reigniting the debate about whether AWS is secure. And it's a little bit absurd because the facts are that this wasn't a vulnerability in AWS. This was someone who, found, it sounds like, credentials in GitHub, got access to some data on an S3 bucket and downloaded it and so on. And so it's just trying to create more drama than there actually is. And this just happened to be a former AWS employee. And AWS is Amazon Web Services. If you're not in IT and you're just interested in WordPress and cybersecurity and you listen to this podcast, it is Amazon Web Services, of course, a cloud provider and the biggest cloud provider in the world, along with Azure and Google Cloud. And so Paige just happened to be a former AWS employee, and so journalists latching onto the narrative of, well, was it insider knowledge about how AWS works and so on? It doesn't appear to be the case. And they're also saying the data could have been accessed by anyone. So that's the story, Kathy. I've kind of gone on about that. I've editorialized here quite a bit. Do you? What's your take on this?
Well, I agree with a lot of what you've said, and there's so many breaches and so many things that are happening like this. It's really important for companies to really do their due diligence. Obviously, I'm really grateful for what we've seen with the open source community that gives people a place. And like with the WordPress community, there's a lot of people there that's their community, and that's the place where they get their social interaction. And there's a lot of people who are rather introverted and don't have social interaction normally, or don't even necessarily want a lot of social interaction, but there's this baseline connection that I think we as human beings all need and want. And I think more communities and more, tech communities need to sort of meet that need with people. Not, to prevent hacking necessarily or whatever, just because I think it's just the right thing to do is to be more welcoming as a community and give people space to have that connection, so that sort of this aberrant type of connection seeking behavior doesn't occur. Yep.
All right. Agreed. So did you get your $125 from Equifax yet?
I looked at it, but I also noticed that you sort of give up your rights when you get you for $125. You're also unable to sue Equifax if anything like really egregious happens. Wow. Isn't that right?
I guess I didn't hear about that. That is really, really interesting. So what's the story here?
Well, what's the story? So Equifax settled with the FTC for $700 million. We reported about this last week. And late last week, an announcement came out that consumers could get $125 from Equifax. And there are obviously, copycat sites that are cropping up with trying to basically phish you. So be very careful with which website you are putting your information into, because this is kind of hitting the news. So as a reminder, with the Equifax settlement, what it's actually addressing is this breach that occurred in 2017. And for your name, if you were affected, your social security number, your birth date, addresses, even driver's license numbers were all breached. And this affected about close to 145 million U.S. customers, as well as 400,000 British residents, and up to 44 million, sorry, misread my notes. Also affected some Canadians. So now they're offering you $125 and free credit monitoring.
No. You have to choose. You have to choose between
you have to choose
$125 or free credit monitoring. You can't have both.
Yeah, okay. Great. So I last week I did go and put my name in to see if I was affected. I am affected. Yay, fun. But with these class action lawsuits, basically by getting this payout, that's your payout and you're done.
Right.
And you basically waive any right to take any further legal action. And so, that's how these types of class action suits occur. And it's in the fine print that you can go look up. So I opted not to do it. How about you?
Yeah, I probably also just opt not to do it, just because I don't like the idea of having to agree to something to get some sort of compensation. And I think compensation is just laughable. Your data's out there, and if the fraud that is going to be committed in your name, if you calculate how much your time is worth, no matter what you do for a living, and how many hours you're going to have to spend to recover from that fraud, it's going to cost you a lot more than $125, no matter what you're earning, because it's going to be potentially 100 hours or more. Someone who's very close to me, who shall remain nameless, had their driver's license stolen a couple of years ago, and it was just an unbelievable process. They were cashing checks in. It was in her name with our neighbor's account number. And it was just an incredible amount of time to recover from that. And so the idea that you get free credit monitoring so that you can find out when you've gotten screwed out of, because of this data breach, or $125 is just laughable.
It is.
So, yeah, anyway. All right. So I guess a cyber attack has hit email users probing Russian intelligence. And this is kind of interesting, Kathy. I guess the Financial Times published an article on this on July 26th, and this attack was aimed at investigative journalists and other experts who are probing Russian intelligence activities, and they went after ProtonMail, which bills itself as the world's most secure email platform because of its cutting-edge cryptography and protections against attack. And they became aware of the attempt to compromise their users on Wednesday, and apparently this was a targeted operation. Swiss domains were registered to mimic ProtonMail's user interface, paid for through intermediaries using untraceable Bitcoin transactions. So basically a kind of phishing operation. And fake logging portals on those domains were then synchronized with the real ProtonMail login process for simultaneous login. And that would trick users into also giving up their 2FA authentication codes. So fairly sophisticated phishing operation. And apparently it exploited a rare unpatched coding bug, in quotes, unlikely to be understood by all but the best resourced hackers. So what they're implying here is that it's a nation state threat actor, or otherwise known as an APT, or advanced persistent threat. And those targeted in the ProtonMail phishing attack have been rattled, in particular by how the attackers gained the details of their usernames and accounts in the first place. Many use anonymized addresses, which are only known to a close circle of trusted contacts. This looks like a Fancy Bear, which is and APT28, which is Russia by another name, and they attributed the hack against the Hillary Clinton campaign back in 2016 to Fancy Bear and APT 28. So yeah, interesting story there. Apparently, even the most secure mail provider is a target, eh?
Yeah, well, it's the users of that service that are being targeted. And there's been some investigation. I saw ProtonMail actually addressing IB Times. It looks like a Singaporean newspaper that was actually saying that ProtonMail was somehow compromised. But it's just a phishing expedition that's basically targeting users of ProtonMail. So ProtonMail itself doesn't appear at all to have any type of vulnerability, but some journalists are kind of getting that story a little off, and so just wanted to make sure that that was clear. The Financial Times reported it just, on point, but some other reporters were missing that, so just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, no, for sure, and kudos to the FT there. I am a subscriber, and I had to send you a guest link, I think, so you could read that.
Yes,
unfortunately, it's all
you.
Behind a paywall, but it is expensive, but brilliant reporting from them. So Marcus Hutchins, he's been spared a jail sentence over the malware charges. So just as a reminder, Marcus is a security researcher who stopped the WannaCry malware outbreak. And the way he did that was by registering a domain that was a kill switch for the malware. He went in and took a look at the source of WannaCry, or reverse engineered it anyway, and then discovered that there's a kill switch in there, and he thought, well, what happens if I register this? And he did, and stopped it in its tracks from spreading. Unfortunately, Marcus, a little earlier in his life, and I think he might have been a teenager, but don't quote me on that, he was accused of creating the Kronos banking Trojan and UPAS-Kit, which is a desktop malware that's designed to steal data without detection. Marcus was actually arrested at DEF CON in 2017 as he was about to leave to fly back to the UK. And I happened to see him, I don't know if I told you this, Kathy, but I happened to see him at B-Sides in London after he stopped WannaCry, but before he was arrested. And he was basically surrounded by fans and so on, and it was obviously a very happy time in his life. And then he was arrested at DEF CON 2017, and his life went to hell for about 2 years, and I actually saw him in 2018, last year, at B-Sides Las Vegas, and he seemed like a bit of a different person. Big cloud over his head and so on, and the lawsuit at that point was pending, and I think he just wanted to get that out of his life. And I saw him at a party later on that evening, and Krebs was there as well, and the three of us were just chatting for a bit, and yeah, just not super happy. But a few days ago, he was sentenced to time served because I think he's been under a kind of house arrest, and he hasn't been able to leave the US to go back to the UK where he lives. And of course, now he can go back to the UK and get on with his life. And I'm sure he's euphoric based on his tweets and so on. He's thanking a lot of people and that kind of thing. My concern is that I guess as an immigrant to the US and the UK and France and the various other places I've lived, I know a little bit about the requirements and to live in countries and to get visas to visit countries and that kind of thing. And I don't think he's going to be allowed back into the US ever again unless he gets some kind of special permission or dispensation, which sucks. And he's probably going to have a hard time visiting other countries in some cases, because generally they'll want to know if you have a criminal record of any kind, and he does now. Because he was found guilty, he just was sentenced to time served, and then and it's probably going to limit his career options. So a little bit of a bummer for him. It looks like he did create some malware when he was fairly young, and it came back to bite him. So I guess that's the story there.
Yeah, and I saw a recent tweet from him where it was July 29th that he stated, "Now my case is over, the stress should subside, and I can final ... my lawyer." Just a friendly reminder that you need to pack up your entire apartment, say goodbye to all of your friends, then move across the sea. Sometime this week would be good. And so it's kind of unfortunate, because as he was here waiting for his trial, he was, living his life. And now that it's over, he has to leave. And it's just been so disruptive for him, and he's such a smart guy and has done served the world in a good way. And it's just unfortunate all the way around.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Anyway, so Facebook.
Your favorite topic.
Oh, totally.
Well, this one should make you happy,
I'm
though.
not on Facebook. I know that I've mentioned that many times, but there's a reason for that. I can't stand the platform. Yeah, you want to run with this one?
Sure. So
Hit it.
this was announced last week. We are reporting from the FTC.gov site that the FTC reported that they were imposing a $5 billion with a B penalty and sweeping new privacy restrictions on Facebook. So this should make Mark happy. I arranged this just for you, actually. So they're going to pay this $5 billion penalty. They're settling, and they are also going to submit to new restrictions and a modified corporate structure that will hold the company accountable for the decisions it makes about user privacy. So the Federal Trade Commission charges that the company had violated a 2012 FTC order by deceiving users about their ability to control privacy of their personal information on the Facebook platform. This is the largest penalty ever imposed on any company for violating consumer privacy. It's 20 times greater than the largest privacy or data security penalty ever imposed worldwide. So it's kind of a big deal. And this agreement that they're striking with the FTC is creating multiple channels of compliance. So they have to not only restructure their approach to privacy from the corporate board level down, they have to establish strong new mechanisms to make sure that Facebook executives are accountable for the decisions that they make about privacy. And these decisions are going to be subject to, quote, meaningful oversight. The suit states that Facebook allowed the company to share users' personal information with third-party apps that were downloaded by users' Facebook friends. So, Mark, if you and I were friends on Facebook and I downloaded, a game to play, that game would collect information about you, which you obviously didn't consent to just by being my friend. So the FTC alleges that many users weren't aware of that and couldn't take that step to opt out. So they also the FTC alleges that Facebook took inadequate steps to deal with apps that they knew were violating platform policies. So this basically it feels like regulation in the social media space that not only is Facebook subject to this $5 billion fine, they are being subjected to greater oversight to make sure that they're protecting users' privacy going forward. So there's a number of requirements that have been placed upon Facebook. What do you think, Mark?
Well, I think the FTC is really crowing about this. They see it as a big win. It's great. They get to start next month with $5 billion in their pockets, and that's going to make anyone happy. It feels like they're doing regulation, which is kind of their job. So I'm sure that they can kind of point to that. The leadership over at FTC can point to that and say, "We're doing our job. Pay us more or reward us or give us a medal or whatever." However, FTC people are rewarded. But the trouble I have with this is that Facebook still exists as a platform, and their business model is to aggregate as much data from as many people around the world as they possibly can and monetize that data, and that is their reason, raison d'être, their reason for existing, and their business model, and so that data is stored somewhere. Every week we're talking about a ton of data breaches, and Facebook has been, I don't think they've even suffered from sort of direct data breaches here. It's just sloppiness in general, with Cambridge Analytica and so on, that has caused the data to get out, or maybe just being a little bit too aggressive in terms of monetization. And data wants to be free, and even if Facebook isn't sharing that data with anyone, which is highly unlikely because it kind of breaks their business model, that data is still going to get out, and they're encouraging folks to put as much private information as they can in a giant repository waiting for someone to come and grab it, or for Facebook to monetize it in an inappropriate way. The other issue I have, and this is actually the most kind of tangible issue I have, Kathy, is that their revenue is 55.8 billion in 2018. So this fine is less than 10% of that, of 1 year's revenue. And so it just is really, it doesn't impact their business operations at all. You know, they can take that charge, no problem, and find a new and creative way to make even more money off your data. So yeah. Anyway, I won't jump on the bandwagon too much. I'm sure people are sick of me going on about that, but
well, it's good to keep it in mind. I mean, if you are going to place information on Facebook, be aware of what's happening to it, and just make a conscious decision if that's what you're going to do. Be willing to deal with the ramifications thereof.
Yeah, I think so. All right, so there's kind of a pattern that we're noticing, right, about municipalities being hit with ransomware and various other attacks.
Yeah, well, we've reported on a number of stories. There was a city in Florida that had a ransomware attack. Baltimore was crippled by a ransomware attack.
Atlanta.
And that went on for Atlanta. There have been so many different municipalities, and now we have 2 stories this week of police officers and police departments that have been affected by breaches and ransomware. The first one was reported by Catalin Kimpanu in ZDNet on July 29th, and this was ransomware infection that took some police car laptops offline in Georgia. And it looks like the ransomware didn't infect the police car laptops directly, but rather the DPS, or the Department of Public Safety backend, making laptops installed in police cars across some departments lose connectivity and access to crucial police information. This happened last Friday, July 26th. According to a report by the local Atlanta Fox 5 News, the ransomware was first spotted on a field laptop when an officer saw a strange message on their screen, and so that infection was rapidly spreading to the DPS network, so they decided to shut down all of their IT systems, including email servers, the public website, backend servers, to contain the infection, which sounds like a good move, but that move actually cut access for all police car laptops to agency data. So it impacted 3 Georgia police departments: the Georgia State Patrol, the Highway Patrol Agency for the state of Georgia, Georgia Capitol Police, the police department responsible for law enforcement in Atlanta's Capitol Hill area, and the Georgia Motor Carrier Compliance Division. That's the division responsible for safety inspections. So I'm sure we'll hear more news about this coming out soon. And then today, it looks like we had thousands of Los Angeles police caught up in a data breach. What's the story there, Mark?
Yeah, so the LA Personnel Department had a data breach, and it affected 2,500 serving officers and over 17,000 rookies who've applied to become officers, which is kind of interesting because I guess that suggests that they don't select many people who apply. But anyway, I'm not sure why there's such a disparity there. But the department wasn't aware until the hacker actually contacted them with a sample of the data. It includes names, partial social security numbers, dates of birth, email addresses, and credentials that were used when applying for roles in the department have also potentially been compromised. So yeah, another municipality here, and I really think that what we're seeing, I used to, as a long time ago, but very long time ago, but I used to do IT support for small businesses in one of my very first jobs, and I just remember and municipalities, and I remember their systems were always the oldest, the most out of date, and so on, because they have budget constraints. In the private sector, you tend to have more of a profit impetus, and so systems are more up to date, investments have been made, and that kind of thing in IT. And government systems, I think, are just very, very out of date, especially local municipal level systems. And I think that's what we're seeing here. As you know, with WordPress and with Windows and with just about anything else, you have to the best way to stay secure is to update your systems, and keep things up to the current patch level, or update your plugins to the latest version. And here, I think that's the pattern that we're seeing. And I got to tell you, Kathy, I don't think I told you the story, but the film that we've been working on, when I was doing post-production in Denver with the filmmakers, with Sean and Andrew, and it was Sean in this case, we needed to do the final mixing on the film, the audio, and we needed studio monitors. So we went to the local, and I got to pronounce this word correctly because people make fun of me, the local pawn shop. And we bought,
how would you normally say it?
I'm sure you can imagine that. It sounds a lot like porn. Let's put it that way. And my wife laughs her ass off at me. But anyway, we went to this pawn shop and bought these studio monitors, and they were running this ancient PC. And I asked if they'd been hit by ransomware yet, and they said no. And I said to the owner that they would be, and she was like, "Oh, come on, no, we won't. It'll be fine. You're just trying to make us nervous or whatever." And I was trying to be as undramatic as possible. But the reality here is that if you have an out-of-date computer system lying around in an office or at home, it is going to get hit by ransomware or some other attack. And it's just a case of when. And I guess maybe at some point every old system will have been breached, and then there'll be nothing more to breach, and everyone will know that they need to update. It's going to be this process of education through attrition, right?
Yeah, I guess so. Is your computer is either going to be up to date, or it's going to be completely, I don't know, breached, red screen, whatever happens with ransomware. I've actually never seen a ransomware attack.
Yeah.
Knock on wood there.
Yeah, maybe that's because you're a cybersecurity expert. Who knows?
I'm up to date.
All right. So I guess Comodo got hit by a little something.
Yeah, they did. This was reported in TechCrunch on July 27th. A hacker gained access to internal files and documents owned by the security company and former SSL certificate issuer Comodo by using an email address and password that were exposed on the internet. Luckily, it was an ethical hacker. It was Jel Ursem, a Netherlands-based security researcher. I hope I didn't butcher your name. I'm so sorry. Who found the credentials and then contacted Comodo's vice president by WhatsApp to secure the account. And that password was revoked the following day. Now, these credentials were found on a public GitHub repository owned by a Comodo software developer. And with that email address and password, the hacker was able to log into the company's Microsoft-hosted cloud service. Now, the article in TechCrunch, I was like, okay, this is a great story about an ethical hacker who found credentials and, did the ethical thing. But according to this ethical hacker, he wasn't the first person to find this exposed email address and password. According to TechCrunch, he told TechCrunch that the account had already been hacked by someone else who had been sending out spam.
Ouch. So,
yes. He shared a screenshot of a spam email that was sent out purporting to offer tax refunds from the French Finance Ministry. This same security researcher, Ursem, had found a similar exposed set of internal ASUS passwords on an employee's GitHub public account. And he also, TechCrunch is also noting that Uber was breached much in the same way after internal credentials were found on GitHub. So always audit your GitHub and make sure your GitHub and everything has 2FA and don't put public credentials anywhere in a repository, even if you think it's locked down. It might not be, so it's just better not to have it there.
Yeah, and if you want to do some deep thinking about how to securely store credentials and keys and that kind of thing, check out my interview with Chris Teitzel. That was a few weeks ago at WordCamp EU. Chris he's in the WordPress space, and he's built his business around managing keys, and he's done a lot of thinking about that, and we talk about how he does that algorithmically, and it was over beer. Over beer.
That was impressive.
So yeah, that was I know, beer, right?
And beer and encryption.
Thank you.
Only here on Think Like a Hacker.
Right. Have you noticed how any story that's like vaguely salacious, I will hand it straight to you? Have you ever noticed that? Yeah?
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to hand
yeah.
this one to you as well. So
Oh,
go for it.
man. Okay. All right. Well, hey, Siri. I had to do that for a fact. My computer just went off. So Siri is Apple's digital assistant. For Android users, it's the same thing as OK Google, but Siri is Apple's friend to have voice activation. And according to a report in Ars Technica on Friday, July 26th, Siri is listening to a lot more than you think. So the headline was, Siri is recording fights, doctor's appointments, and sex. And contractors are hearing it. So The Guardian is essentially the first report on this came from The Guardian, and reported that contractors who are reviewing Siri recordings for accuracy and to help make improvements are hearing personal conversations. The source stated that there have been countless instances of recordings featuring private discussions between doctors and patients, which would be a HIPAA breach, business deals, seemingly criminal dealings, sexual encounters, and so on. So these recordings are accompanied by user data showing location, contact deals, and details, and app data. So, I mean, Siri, in order to function, has to kind of always be listening. It has to always be able to detect whether or not it's being summoned. Right. So these are just, we have these digital assistants, and we have all of this intelligence that is listening. And Apple, along with Google and Amazon, all have similar types of devices, and they have similar policies for the contract workers that they employ to review audio snippets for accuracy. But all of them have been having similar types of privacy breaches, either by whistleblowers reporting this to the press or through errors that are giving users access to incorrect audio files. So it sounds like a really great technology, and I don't know. I hardly ever use it because it just doesn't work very well for me. But I know a lot of other people who rely very strongly on their digital assistants and Alexa and everything else. So,
well, my Alexa likes to talk to herself. I have an external speaker, and so an ad will come on and say, if you want to use such and such a service, just say, "Hey Alexa," and then Alexa will stop and go, wait, "Did someone just call me? Wait, was it me?" But yeah, as far as the story goes, I guess the sex, side of it is not a huge deal, because hopefully most adults are having sex. But the HIPAA violation that you mentioned is obviously a legal issue. And then what really kind of occurred to me listening to you report the story is that to get all of these things, business dealings, criminal dealings, etc., you'd actually have to have a lot of samples. I mean, how many conversations do you think contain a business deal or a criminal deal? I mean, it's got to be like 1 in 1,000, 1 in 10,000, something like that. So I guess it suggests that they're actually listening to a lot of data, and that is kind of interesting. So I don't know, maybe I'll turn Alexa off for a while.
Yeah, well, you'll have to turn your phone off too and make sure that whatever digital assistant you have there isn't listening too.
Yeah,
it's kind of everywhere. I mean, if you're sitting in a coffee shop or at a bar and you're having a conversation and it's about a business deal that you're trying to put together, and it's sensitive, and it's you have devices everywhere that are listening. It's almost complete. I mean, in aggregate, all of these devices everywhere, it's like complete surveillance if somebody had the power. But it's interesting, and it's something I think we just need to watch because of our privacy needs.
Yeah, agreed. All right, so last story here is kind of a fun one, and it's research from Imperial College in London, published on July 23rd, 2019. And they've done some research where if you've ever gone to one of these websites that asks, do you mind if we anonymously share some of your data with our partners? And maybe you say, yeah, because you like the website and you want to help their business a little bit. Well, what Imperial College showed in their research is that it's actually very easy to de-anonymize that data. So if that data has demographic information in it, like your zip code, your gender, your date of birth, and so on, they managed to come up with an algorithm that lets them tell you how the probability of one of these organizations that has anonymous data being able to de-anonymize the data and successfully identify you. And so, Kathy, I guess, so there's a website, and it is cpg.doc.ic.ac.uk/individual-risk/. You gotta love academic websites. But did you go and give this a try?
Yeah, of course I did. Had to. So I and this is sort of expected, because where I lived a year and a half ago was in a smaller town, not many people, and now I'm living in a much more urban area, lots more people. And so my percentages here in the Phoenix area, I got 68% identifiable. And then in Mount Shasta, where I used to live, I got 92%. And that was just on the initial zip code, gender, and birth date. Now, if I added marital status and number of vehicles, it went to 99% in Phoenix and 100% in Shasta. And that one shocked me, that it went to 99% in Phoenix, that they would be able to identify who I am just by marital status and number of vehicles. That was crazy to me.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. So I got 78%, and I didn't add any more data than just the basics. And yeah, so interesting, and you can we'll put that in the show notes, and you can go and give it a try and completely freak yourself out. And now you've got something else to worry about in terms of cybersecurity.
Yay!
But, yay! Well, so
here to keep it real.
Keeping it real. All right, so that's it for this week's news. If you're watching on YouTube, give us a like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please give us a rating, leave us a review, and let us know how we're doing. Especially if you like us, and if you don't like us, don't leave a review, it's okay. But we'll be airing our next interview later this week, so stay tuned for that, and have a wonderful rest of your week. Bye, everyone.